doesn't matter if you're in a corporate environment. It doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, a mom at home. We all have a brand because you're engaging with other people, right? So how do you want to show up and how do you want other people to know you? Right?
Welcome to the Badass Leaders Podcast. Today's guest is Vicki Bradley, who is the founder and CEO of both Vicki Bradley and Company and Women in Leadership Empowered, an online community offering women the opportunity to accelerate their career growth and potential using 4 approaches to their leadership development: coaching, networking, peer-to-peer mentoring, and skills training. She is also a professional certified coach and expert in emotional intelligence and conversational intelligence. With over 25 years of experience in leading high-performing teams across North America, Vicki has held executive roles including President of Bombay Furniture Canada, SVP at Marks & Spencer, VP at Holt Renfrew, and various leadership positions at Woolworths. We're thrilled to have her with us today. So if you're new to the podcast, welcome to our community. We're thrilled you've taken time out of your very busy day to learn and grow with us. Before you forget, take a moment to click that subscribe button to ensure you stay connected with the Badass Leaders community. Are you ready? Let's do this. So join me, Angela Gill Nelms, on today's episode of the Badass Leaders Podcast, where I'm joined each week by industry experts for intimate and eye-opening discussions about the challenges and joys facing the leaders of today. Listen in and get ready to scale your company, grow your brand, and unlock your full badass potential. First off, welcome back to the Badass Leaders Podcast. And the reason I'm saying that is that Vicki's amazing. Vicki and I recorded an episode, and I have to say this. So I'm a biomedical engineer. I love technology. I love all of the widgets. And we recorded, I don't know, maybe 6 to 8 weeks ago, maybe longer than that, an amazing episode. It was beautiful, except for my microphone sound was awful. And of course, I didn't realize it until afterwards, and I was so horrified. And I said, we absolutely cannot release this. Vicki deserves better. And so she was so generous and said, hey, I'll come join you again, and we will do this all over again. And so we are not going to have the same conversation. We're going to have a brand new conversation today. And so, Vicki, will you please introduce yourself and tell us why you're here today?
Absolutely. Well, and thank you. We did have a great conversation and we got to know each other really well. And so I was super grateful for that. And when you called me and said, oh my goodness, it was crackling everywhere. It was like, darn. But you know what? Like we were talking about just before we started on here, it is, whatever's meant to be is meant to be. And so this is perfect. And we get to have a brand new conversation and learn even more about each other and about the work that we do. So yeah, I'm here to chat with you today to talk about some of the work that I do and maybe share a few stories. But really just, sharing with your audience who I am and what I do. Yeah.
Awesome. So you have in your background the Women in Leadership Empowered. Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about some of the work that you do there. I think we had said that I want to talk about 3 key themes that you really focus on. So leading with confidence, conscious leadership, and then building your brand story. Yeah. So why don't we dig in first? Katie, my producer, is like, Angela, let the people know who these individuals are as humans. I love that she reminds me to do this because it is one of the things I love to do as a human as well. I'm like, stop talking about the titles and what you do in your career. Get to know individuals as who they are. So tell us a little bit about who you are in your day-to-day life. Like, who is Vicki as a human being?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And you and I are like so connected. Like if we lived in the same area, we'd probably be best friends.
We would be friends.
Yeah, yes. Seriously. We have a lot in common. Who Vicki is, Vicki has learned more about herself probably in the last few years than she's ever known. I'm a protector at heart. I never understood why I was a protector until a couple of years ago when I went back to school and I started a transdisciplinary PhD program. And one of the things they made us do, Ange, was we had to write free flow writing, and you couldn't lift your pen. And I use this now all the time in my own work because stuff comes out. And all of a sudden I realized, oh, this is why I'm a protector. And it was amazing, right? And so my career, if I look at my career history, I spent 30 years in corporate environments. I tended to
And
always...
what does it mean to be a protector? Like if
Oh,
people hear
sorry.
that, what does it mean? Yeah.
For me, I'm that person who defends. I'm that person who will speak up for somebody who doesn't maybe have the voice or they don't have the confidence. But also, I teach them how to get the confidence, right? And how to really do it in their authentic way. And to me, that's really important because my style is going to be very different from somebody else's. But I would say, like, protection for me is advocating, right? And so much in our life now, we have to do that, whether it's healthcare, whether it's our finances, political beliefs, whatever, right? We're always advocating. And, that is something I think I've gotten really good at through my career. But really giving voice to things that sometimes people don't want to talk about or they're uncomfortable with because they don't want to make other people uncomfortable. And so sometimes it's how you do it. And that's about really being conscious too, which I know we're going to talk a little bit about conscious leadership, but that's also being conscious about what is actually happening and are we reacting to it? Are we responding to it? But at the core, I'm a person who I believe in people. I'm a connector at the core. I love meeting new people. It's very easy for me to meet new people. And I'm always, even if I'm in line at the grocery store, I'm chatting because, what are they purchasing? How are they feeling about what's happening right now? Just even having those small conversations because I might be the only person that talks to that person all day long.
Absolutely.
Right? And so at the core, I think that's who I am. I mean, I'm really a connector and an advocate, protector. And I continue to hone that and find ways that will support others. And that's important to me, serving others in a bigger, better, more fluid way than, it's easy to say I'm a servant leader, but it's even more than that because it's really at the core, no matter what you're doing or how you're doing it.
Yeah, that is powerful. I've tried that continuous writing. First off, I've tried journaling. Do you know how many journals that I have that have like
Likewise.
4 pages filled out? And I always buy the most beautiful journals, right? Because
and the best pen. You have to have the right pen when you're writing.
Yes, and the right pen. And then I just don't keep at it. One day I will do that. But yeah, there is so much research in the benefit of that. And so I love that. And I love that you're working on. So this may be a silly question. And I know because I've been in higher education for so long. How much longer do you have in your PhD? Do you know?
Ooh, yes, I have at least 2 years.
Okay.
So I've completed 2 years. I have 2 years to go, and just now getting ready to dig into the actual research part of it. The first 2 years was the lead up to what I wanted to do the research on. And it falls in alignment with who I am, right? Because it's really about trust and power and those power dynamics that take place within a leadership context, and how that impacts women, right? Because we don't even realize that most corporations are they are gender nuanced toward men,
Right.
not intentionally, but the reality of it is even contracts, agreements, negotiations, it's all very male nuanced. And I want to really understand how we, balance the power dynamics better, but also how do we create trust? And, what happens when there's mistrust or distrust? And so that all falls into this protection and advocacy So yeah, that's kind of what the path I've been on the last 2 years. And I do a lot of workshops on trust with clients, and really trying to help organizations understand even policies, like policies we set. So we'll say, we're a people-centric organization, but then we set these policies that are completely distrusting. And then people are like, well, wait a minute. I thought our culture was supposed to be, we're people-centric. We believe in our people. We trust our people. And so often it's innocent in why we do these things, because we're thinking, okay, we have a situation we need to resolve, but we're not completely thinking it through and what the psychological impact has the potential to do. Yeah.
Okay, I love the topic of trust, which wasn't even really on the agenda for today.
Yeah.
But I think, the thing about trust to me is that so many people think they have trust, think they exude trust. And then the reality is they exude the opposite of trust. And they don't understand that by the actions that they do, or the I'm trying to think of, I can visualize it by their body language, by the fact that they've done a few things, they've completely lost the trust of their entire team. And by those small things that they think do not matter, those small things really are everything that matters.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are the big things that they will never get that trust back, and that matters. Can you give a few examples of some of those things that you see when you teach these trust workshops? What are some of the maybe surprising things that you perhaps teach in a workshop that someone listening to this podcast may take away as aha moments?
Well, yeah, that's a great question, actually. One of the things that I do, even to start, conversations, is I have to build trust first before I can even talk about trust, right? And so one simple exercise I will often do with a group is share something about yourself that nobody would know and they wouldn't be able to Google about you. And I had one back in the fall. I had a group of 16 leaders, and we went through this experience, and people went very deep, very fast. And the CEO said to me after, he said, okay, hang on a second. I was not prepared for that. And I said, okay. And he got very emotional because he also participated in this. And he goes, I was just not prepared for that. And I said, okay, so help me understand, how are you feeling about this? And he said, I had no idea that my people were dealing with all the things they're dealing with, because people would come out and talk about whether it was a child maybe they had that was going through some difficulties, or a parent, or they had experienced loss, like things that he didn't even know were happening in their lives. And he said, I've always kept it business. I've never asked. And so that really set the tone for that particular conversation. So that's just one example. I also do a lot of exercises with people. Like there's one called the red and black game, and it's all about winning. Like the goal of the game is to win, but it teaches people very quickly, because you have to do it in teams, and you have to really rely on your team, but you don't realize it when you're in the heart of it, but you're also relying on the other team, right? And so you're trusting, what are they going to say? How are they going to respond? And so it really creates these dynamics that breaks through sort of the barriers of why they don't trust, right? And so you can open up conversations then to say, well, Ange, when you come in my office and your tone is demanding, my back goes up, and I'm like, you're not getting anything from me, right? So it's a way to really open up conversations and get people seeing each other as human, number one, which we often forget to do. So it does connect them on a much deeper level. And then one other thing that I will do from early days, I put these different colors up on, like if it's a live event, I'll put different colors up on the wall. and I will ask people to go stand in front of that particular color. And so one might be wait and see, one might be I'm ready to experiment. And basically what you're trying to get to is, where are you at this moment with this group of people? Sometimes people will go to, I don't trust any of you. And it's very eye-opening when other participants go, wow, why does Vicki not trust any of us? And then you might have somebody over here that's fully ready to collaborate, but the rest of the group is going, yeah, that's not really how Ann shows up, right? She doesn't really want to co-create and collaborate together. So it's a very visual way to get people to understand where they are on that sort of that trust meter, and are they protecting themselves, or are we able to move to a space where we can do things collectively?
What are some common reasons at the core that people struggle with trust?
Often it's belief systems that they have, and it might not even be associated with where they are at that time, but they've been disappointed at some point in their life, and so they haven't resolved that issue, and so they carry that forward with them. So, an example might be, oh, if I share that information, it'll get used against me. And so they hold things very close, right? Or I don't want to speak up in that meeting because I don't want people to think I'm stupid, because somewhere in their past, someone has been dismissive about their comments or about the things that they're sharing. And so those, we think those are innocent, and people will say, well, suck it up, you got to get over that. But those things actually layer on top of layer on top of layer, and we carry them with us. I think there's also this perceived thought that leaders often, when they get put in those positions, they think automatically, well, I'm in this position, so you should trust me. And they forget about, you have to build goodwill. You're starting over. And then how do you do that, right? It's not about coming in and telling everybody what to do. It's coming in and demonstrating and showing. So tell me what's working. Tell me what's not working. Where are the barriers, right? What's making it hard for you to do your job? So start trying to understand where they've been, what they've tried, because that then shows them that, A, you're listening, right? And that you are really trying to solve a problem. And I just had this recently with a gentleman that I was coaching, and he was talking, he goes, I've been asked to sit on the CEO roundtable sessions. And he said, I'm scared to say things. And I said, okay. I said, why are you scared? And he said, well, number one, I'm afraid it'll cost me my job if I really tell them how people are feeling and what's happening. And so I said to him, I said, why do you think you were chosen? And he goes, well, he said, I know I should. And I said, but let's talk about how you could without it hurting. So we worked on, because sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it, right? And when you're coming from that place of genuine care, concern, you want to make things better, you're modeling more of a trusting attitude, a trusting behavior, because just what you were mentioning about body language, your body language can completely sabotage that message. Your tone can completely sabotage that message. So it's being conscious. So back to conscious leadership, it's being conscious about how you're showing up. Are you listening? Are you engaging? Or are you just going through the motions of, well, I'm the leader, I'm going to tell you what to do? And that usually does not work.
Yeah. I would venture to say almost always does not work in the long term. And I was recently on a panel where I was asked to talk about being on boards. And when I was giving advice to the women, I said, one of the things that I recommend that you do is ask, why was I asked to be on this board? What does success look like for me in this role on the board? And what you just said, I think for that individual on that CEO roundtable would be to say, what does success look like? And I think if you're struggling with the ability to speak up, if you do a pause and say, why did you ask me to be on this board? And then you say, okay, well, I want to be transparent. I'm struggling right now speaking up, but since you asked me to be on the board, to be the voice of the people, I want to be transparent and share some, struggles that the team is having. So I'm going to go ahead and do this because I really am passionate about fulfilling my role because that's what you've asked me to do. Yeah. And when you convey it that way, then the team is like, yep, we asked you to do this and you're doing it. Thank you for doing that. And that, once again, being conscious of saying that and also being transparent, the whole mind shift of that is so powerful. And I'm thinking right now, someone asked me the other day, what's the purpose of the Badass Leaders podcast? And I said, here's the deal. I believe we can grow a generation of badass leaders. And by bringing individuals who are amazing leaders and know how to coach and train those leaders and give those skills, we can help the next generation gain each of these skills, become badass leaders. We can totally revolutionize leadership, teams, companies, organizations. And so when you think about trust, I really strongly believe it's impossible to be a badass leader if you do not know how to have that skill of trust and earn it and really understand how valuable it is and how you really should protect it at all areas.
Absolutely.
Because it's really one of those core values.
Absolutely. Well, and it's questioning everything, right? Like I was just on a call before we got on the podcast, and we were talking about a situation where somebody was having a really hard time. And I said, why do you think this person is being so combative? Right? And that person, my assumption, okay, is that they weren't trusting, right? They weren't feeling valued. They weren't feeling heard. So it was like, how can you switch the narrative so that they can feel heard, even when they're combative, right? Because they're holding on to a lifeline right now, hoping that somebody's going to listen, somebody's going to think that what they're sharing is important. So how can you hold that lifeline for them? Doesn't mean you have to agree. And that's a big difference, Ange. Like, you don't have to agree, but hearing them out, really making them feel heard is absolutely essential. And especially as a leader. And you're going to have a lot of things thrown at you all the time, right? And you're making the best decisions you can, but it's better, I think, personally, when you can have that collaborative group that helps you navigate all those complexities, right? Because they're part of the journey. They become part of the solve instead of everything falling on just the leader's shoulders. So you're sharing in that leadership, you're sharing in that strategy and the direction forward.
Absolutely. So you create a safe environment. Mm-hmm. You see your colleagues as human beings. You behave in a trustworthy manner. You're also continuing learners. So, I mean, I am dying to know what nudged you to get a PhD at this stage in your career. I mean, I love that because one of the things I'm listening to, I am obsessed with watching other podcasts as well. Every day, I'm constantly trying to learn. I'm reading constant books. I'm obsessed with Simon Sinek's podcast and Mel Robbins' podcast. And constantly trying to learn one new tool or the other. And I'm thinking, look at you, Vicki, getting your PhD. So what nudged you in that direction?
Yeah, great question. And some days I smack my head and say, what was I thinking? I'm like,
probably also when I asked you how much longer do you have to go, you were probably like, why did she ask me that question?
Well, because you know what, honestly, like, it has been such an incredible experience, like, truly. And part of that is that love of learning, right? And for me, it was really, you know what, I don't even know how to really describe it, but I was at this place in my life where I was like, I want to push myself. I want to expand my own perspectives, right? Because we are so isolated, if you really think about it.
Absolutely.
We don't get enough broad perspective. Like, we have our beliefs, we have our way of doing things, and we often resist like really looking and engaging in other people's beliefs. And again, especially if we don't agree with it, it's really hard to engage with that person or group or whatever, right? And so when I learned about this transdisciplinary PhD, I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is amazing, because it does change the way we lead. So when you're talking about this next generation, it is very much about, if you have a problem, it's not that there's one solution. It's looking at that problem from multiple different perspectives, because that problem probably exists within every industry, right? And so we have made problems bigger than what they are. And we've also created these silos that only, this group can fix it, right? So even if you look at science is very much about, this is the problem, and we're going to dissect it. And I know you're in science, right? So we look at it in this particular lens. And when we're looking at business, like, we can learn so much from all of these different industries, and how we actually change the way that we solve problems. And so when I learned about the transdisciplinary, it was like, oh my gosh, like, I just fell in love, to be honest. And I interviewed with 3 different universities, and one of the universities in particular, I fell in love with the professor that I interviewed with, like, instant. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, I could learn so much from this man. And I said to the guy that was helping me with my applications, I said, I only want to go to this school. And he goes, Vicki, it doesn't work that way. And I go, well, what do you mean? And he goes, well, they have to accept you. And I go, well, if this one doesn't accept me, then I'm just not going to go, because I want to work with this professor. And lo and behold, that was the school that I got accepted by 2 of the 3. And that was the one that I went with. And honestly, like, he was life-changing for me in just his scope of how he would look at things and challenge you to look at things. He just retired last summer, so I was heartbroken for that. But it just, as a human being, it has really stretched me to be more empathetic, to look at problems differently, right? There's always a solution. And that solution is not just one way. There's like so many different ways that you can approach it. And so that was what really excited me. And that's why I went back to school. And I struggled, I'll be honest. In the beginning, I was struggling with, what do I want to do my research on? And that was probably the hardest part, was figuring out, how do
you narrow it down?
Yes.
Yes.
That was tough, because I was like, how do I have an impact in the world? And that sounds lofty, but I'm a firm believer.
No, it does not have. Let's pause for a second. So, my quote is that you were only born once, right? You only have one life. Okay, and so I believe so many people believe in this life in a small way.
Yeah.
And you have one chance to leave a legacy. And I truly believe every single individual was put on this planet to have their own unique impact on the world.
Agree.
And it's their big impact on the world. Everyone should have an impact on the world. And that is my hashtag about be brave, be badass, is everyone has their badass, and it is their impact on the world. And more of us need to be brave enough to realize that we have our special impact, and it is big, and we should do it, and we should go for it. We should not be shy. So yes,
I'm not being
that's
shy.
Not obnoxious. Yes, don't be shy. Go
I am
for it.
not
Do
shy.
it.
I love it. I love it. I love it. You go, you go. That's awesome. And you're right. You're right. I mean, and so often we're dismissive, right? And so for
Yeah.
me, it was like, how do I have this really big impact? And so that's how I narrowed it down. And it took me a little while to get there because most of my life has been spent in corporate, either working in it as an executive or now serving it as a coach, right? Or doing leadership development. And so I see all these things, all these habits and patterns that are happening. And it's like, why are we not making this easier and better? And that's really what has led me to this research topic. Because I truly believe that when you have trust, when power is balanced and not 50-50, but when it's more balanced, when it's harmonized, it's shared, you get results. People get things done, and they do it from a place of joy. They do it from a place of good, not bad. It's coming from a place of good. And, for me, that's really the impact that I want to have is, helping other people find mechanisms, tools, frameworks that will help them build better organizations, no matter what industry you're in. You could be in finance, you could be in healthcare, you can be in technology, but it's like fundamentally we're human beings at the core. So how do we be
Yes.
better human beings?
I love it. I love it. Okay. So then let's talk about confidence, because that, I think a lot of times going back to this idea that some of us think we don't have an impact to make, or think we can't make an impact, or we try and lead, but we get up in front of our team and we don't convey a level of confidence so that the team believes in us. Let's talk about, you specialize in leading and confidence. Tell us more.
Well, that's a great question. And I think often what happens, it's sort of that misnomer that, people think, well, confidence is I'm going to get up and I'm going to tell everybody what to do. Confidence is actually, right? I know everything, do it my way. And I see this all the time. And I challenge clients on this all the time. Why are you telling? Telling does not get you where you want to get to. So confidence is about believing in, confidence is about trusting in those that you have surrounded yourself with, right? So if I'm a leader of a corporation, right, I need to make sure that I have the right people around me who are going to be transparent, who are going to be trustworthy, who are going to be part of that shared success, that they take it seriously to, coach, engage, treat our people well, right? And so confidence comes from that inner knowing that, one, you're worthy, right? And sometimes you have to help people by telling them they're worthy, but most importantly, they have to internally tell themselves this. I just went through this with a connection of mine who was looking for external validation. This was in January, and she asked me, she said, can you give me feedback on what you think I'm doing really well in this past year? And I said, well, what do you think you did really well in? Right? And she struggled to communicate it. And I said, look, the bottom line is you're trying to get external validation. You want a title. You want people to look up to you because you have this title. That is not how it works. It doesn't matter what your title is. It's how you're showing up. It's how you're engaging. It's what you believe on the inside. You can be CEO of your life, right? And people often ask me, Angela, they'll say, well, I need that title, Vicki, to become the next. And I'm like, well, that's ridiculous. You don't need a title, right? And companies who are figuring it out are understanding that titles are irrelevant, right? It's that shared leadership. It's that shared responsibilities. And so internally, let me rephrase that. We're never going to be happy externally until we're happy internally. And so what messages are you telling yourself? right? I went through a period about 20 years ago when I hit like rock bottom. I was so sick, came out of nowhere. It was probably the worst time in my life. Okay. My health, like I'm like very successful in my career, $1 million family, 2 young babies, happily married, I thought. And then my health took a major hit. My husband walked out when I was sick. So I have these 2 little babies. And I literally was rock bottom. That's the only way I know how to say it. And I did everything in my power to pull myself out of this dark hole. I didn't know if I was going to be able to ever walk again. And I cried all the time because I was in excruciating pain. But one thing I did do, on my mirror, on my computer, everywhere in my house, I had sticky notes that would say, I'm healthy, I'm wealthy, I'm wise, I am confident. I gave myself sticky notes everywhere in my house because I had to keep telling myself, this is who you are. This illness that has taken over is not who you are. This is who you are. And so confidence really comes from your inner knowing of who you are, how you're showing up in the world. And so for me, those are things I work on with clients, is helping them connect to that. Because just like Angela, when you were talking about, everybody has a role to play in making this a better world. That's exactly right. You got to go in and find what is your connection to this world and how do you show up. When you show confidence, you're giving somebody else permission to show confidence. And we're not talking arrogance. We're talking confidence. Confidence is that, very comfortable in your skin. You get to be authentically who you are, not what you think the world wants you to be. So that's kind of my rant on confidence.
Yeah, I love it. I'm just like, preach it, sister. I people say to me oftentimes, like, how did you overcome this obstacle? Or how did, and I do the exact same thing. I tell people, if you come into my house, actually, I just set up my new office at my new job of Biolocity. And in the first week, what I put up on the wall are motivational signs. Like, I have my life quote is already up on the wall. I have a sign that says up there, discipline equals freedom. I have the Jocko quote that talks about you're not always going to feel like doing it. Hard work, you need to keep doing that. I have quotes in here that says every great story happened when someone decided not to give up. I have another one that says dreams don't expire. I have one that says live your dash. I put these quotes on my walls. I have several tattoos on my body that say motivational quotes. Why? The exact same reason. I need to see them constantly in the environment around me because they remind me constantly the life I am meant to live, the thoughts I want to feed into my head. I listen to these motivational podcasts and things because they keep me going in the direction that I choose, that I want to continue to go and grow.
Love that.
And it is powerful mindset. It completely changes my life. I'm one of those people that I hate to get up in the morning. Okay. And I am just like, okay, I'm going to get up and I am going to choose this morning that I'm going to have a great day and I'm going to make this, like, we're going to talk in a moment about conscious leadership, but I'm going to make this conscious decision that this is what I'm going to do. And there are days that it's more of a struggle than other days. But at the end of the day, I'm always grateful that I made the decision each day to direct my attention towards that positivity, towards the vision, towards those goals, towards the joy, and towards a day where I had an opportunity to grow a little bit, to give a little bit of joy, and to have some gratitude.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. And you're absolutely right. It's a choice, right? You can easily say, if I get up and have this talk, what if my words fumble? Okay. So we get into this spiral of what if, And what you're saying is being very conscious, being very intentional with saying, what if I get up today and it's the best day of my life? That is a choice that you're making. And that is conscious leadership. I mean, that's a big part of it, is the choices that you make. And people have said to me, Vicki, you're uber positive. And I'm like, yeah, it's a choice, right? Because it would be easy to get into this very down. We're in an interesting time in our world, right? And if we get caught up in that, it is very easy to spiral into this negative, life is hard, but also life is great. And so you have to think about, who do you surround yourself with? What are you listening to, right? I was just visiting my mother, taking care of her for the last 2 weeks, and she has Alzheimer's, early days of it, but she listens to the news on recycle from 7 a.m. until 7 or 8 o'clock p.m. And I'm like, Mom, I said, I've not listened to this much news in the last 20 years because I don't. And I'm like, can we put on beautiful music or like watch something happy, right? But what you feed yourself becomes your thoughts. So when you're talking about your office, you've surrounded yourself with these beautiful inspirational quotes. That's what you're feeding consciously and unconsciously. You're feeding yourself with that. And so when we do that, that raises our vibration. We become what we think. So again, it's your choice. So if you're sitting here listening to this episode today and you're going, oh, and you need support, like reach out, right? Like, I mean,
absolutely.
That's what life is about, is finding the support you need to help lift you up so that you can be the person you want to be. You don't have to stay in that spiral.
Absolutely. And there's research that says that if you surround yourself with people who have positive mindsets and are growth minded and are constantly looking to give back to the world in a positive way in this, then you also will. And so I've made conscious decisions that I choose my friends and my colleagues and my team members and all of this very wisely. I move away from the people who are always the glass is empty or half empty or whatnot. I limit my time with those individuals. They add no value to my life. And I am, and the ones who have low emotional intelligence, this is my transition for you to talk about emotional intelligence, so we don't forget about it. Because when you work with, I had someone who reached out to me and wanted mentorship about how to get more involved with Georgia Tech. Like, this individual was like, oh, you've been on all of these boards, you've gotten all these awards. Like, how have you done it? And so I'm super busy, and I allotted this time for this individual, a lot of time, like 45 minutes. And by the end of this time with this individual, I was, quite frankly, pissed off. I was about to say, I now see why no one's returning your calls and responding to you, because you are very selfish, you're very entitled, and you haven't realized that you think everything's all about you and you've earned something. And they're calling and asking me to do things because I have a servant mindset and I just want what's best for the department and all of that. And I'm not asking for anything to return. So they're coming to me and they're giving me these awards and acknowledging me, but I'm not asking for any of that. I'm just giving. And they want to have this. And now you've wasted. And I to be honest, at the end of it, I almost wanted to say, do you realize people pay me $200 for a conversation like this and you just got it for free? And I'm more annoyed at the end of this. And I thought, you clearly have no emotional intelligence at this point. So can you talk about the work? Because you're certified in this. So you do a lot about this. And really, if at the core, if individuals are listening and they're wondering, why do I keep hitting roadblocks in conversations? Why do I reach out to people and they don't return calls, or they're not engaging, they don't get vulnerable? It might be that I'm struggling with emotional intelligence. Can you walk through what that might look like?
Yeah, and I would say we can talk about emotional intelligence, but I would also say this plays beautifully into conscious leadership.
Love
Because
it.
they all go hand in
Dig
hand,
in.
right?
Yep.
They do. They go hand in hand. So let me start with the conscious leadership, if that's okay, because there's two types of ways that we show up energetically. Okay. And sometimes when I say that, people go, "Oh, what are you talking about, Vicki? Are you woo woo?" It's not woo woo. So energetically, we're either showing up catabolic or we're showing up anabolic. You have a very high anabolic energy to you, which is very much a positive mindset, but it's not even positive. It's that I'm a giver, right? And I see opportunity and I'm a visionary. And so you're able to see things from the perspective of how does this have a better or greater good impact on the world. Those who come in with a catabolic energy are the vampire energy suckers, right? Like it is all about them. They're either a victim or they're angry because they're not getting what you have and they want it. And so part of what I work with clients on often is how are you showing up? Right? And we all can show up catabolic, right? Certain situations can happen. The secret is how long are you staying there? If you have somebody who resides in a long period of time in catabolic energy, that's when life changes for you. You can have physical health situations that come from it. Work is impacted because nobody wants to hire you, right? Or your colleagues are saying, yeah, I don't want to work with him or her because like they're so combative and so everything is a struggle. And they're takers. They just want to take and take and take. So they siphon. And so what I work with clients on is helping them understand how they're showing up, right? When things are going great, but also when things are not going great, because that's usually when we slip into catabolic. And then what are your choices? When you are encountering situations, what are the possible choices you have to respond consciously, not react? And so I teach them these different ways that they get to choose, right? So oftentimes I'll hear people say, oh, I didn't have a choice. I could only do that. And it's like, well, not really. You had 7 possible ways that you could look at that situation. And so and especially with leaders, when I'm working with them, helping them understand because they are constantly having torpedoes thrown at them, right? And so it's easy to just knee-jerk react and call things off. And so that pause that you mentioned earlier becomes critical because it's like, okay, what would serve best given this situation? And when somebody can raise that vibration and be much more conscious, they're actually making better choices of how to navigate these different situations. So we're not looking short term, we're looking at more of the long-term effect that can happen.
And I would say that there are certain key phrases that if individuals find themselves saying these phrases, then it should be a red flag to themselves.
Yeah.
So if you find yourself saying phrases such as, I didn't have a choice, that should be a red flag. So if those words are coming out of your mouth, if you can catch them while they're still in your head, stop. Yeah. Because as you just said, we always have a choice. We always do. And it's a cop-out. It's an excuse. Because one choice is to do nothing, to say nothing, to pivot in a way. I mean, there are always choices. And oftentimes when we say, I didn't have a choice, is when we make a decision to do the thing that's the easy path or the passive aggressive path or, some of these things. And we use that as an excuse phrase. So I think there are some phrases like that when I hear individuals say those words, my ears perk up and I think, okay, here is a growth opportunity for that individual to have. If I hear myself saying those words, I'm like, okay, I need to take a step back and I need to have a personal learning lesson right here because I am falling into a trap that I know is not a healthy situation to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great point. I would add to that a couple other things that I often teach in leadership classes is removing the word but
from your vocabulary.
I love.
Right?
Every time I hear someone say but, I'm like, can you replace that with and?
Yes, and.
Exactly.
Let's stop the buts. And that's an important one, right? Because especially in the context of what we're just talking about, because it's easy to say, let's identify what your choices are. Okay. And so you come up with 3 or 4 choices. That person who's living in a catabolic energetic space is going to often say, I didn't have a choice, but that won't work because, and it's like, okay, well, I'm going to challenge that. Okay. I invite you to look at, here's some other possibilities, right? And so it's really helping people get out of their own way and start to see what other options they actually do have. It takes a lot of practice. That energy is also important if you're getting ready to have a tough conversation. Okay. I'll give an example of a client that I had. She had been let go from her employer, like really great superstar, but they were cutting back and they had to restructure. And so she was sadly let go. And she was very angry about this. But one of her assignments, she had to go to the guy who let her go and ask him for a reference letter.
Ooh.
Yeah. Not an easy thing to do. And the guy kept calling her and he was like, can you tell me how to do this? Can you tell me how to do that? And she was like, I just feel like, they've let me go and now they're using me for all this information. So we practiced like how to energetically set herself up so that she felt comfortable and authentic going and having this conversation with them. And so she decided she wanted to see this as an opportunity to exercise her voice, which is what I would consider level 5 energetically. So she set her...
Level 5 out of how many levels?
So there's 7 levels, and level 5 is opportunity.
Okay.
I would get into a lot of that, but it would take us forever to go too much into it. But so she energetically set herself up to, I'm going to meet him for lunch. I'm going to see this as an opportunity. So, and it was an opportunity for her to utilize her voice because she was very resentful and angry that he let her go and he kept calling her and asking her for information. So when she went to meet him for the lunch, she said, I know what he's going to do. He's going to say da 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 da. So we practiced that. And she did exactly what she practiced. She was like, I'm happy to answer some of your questions, but before we get there, let's get this out of the way. So I've produced the reference letter. Could you please have a look at it? Let me know if you're comfortable with it. If you are, you can go ahead and sign it. If you're not, we'll make some adjustments. And he was like, oh, okay. And it distracted him from like being dominating and taking over the conversation. But for her, what it did was it built her confidence way up because she took control of what she felt was such an important conversation for her to have. And so it was her exercising that voice. And so energetically, she moved from that level 1 victim energy of kind of, I'm helpless, he just keeps taking from me, I'm resentful, to, I just raised my confidence level and I was able to get what I needed to get done. And they had a lovely conversation. And he also said to her at the end, he goes, if you need me to have a verbal reference with somebody, I would be happy to do that. Like, I'm just really sad we had to let you go. So it humanized their conversation because of how she showed up for that particular situation.
So I want to tie this into something that's really important, is that the smartest people that I know work with coaches that help them become their best self. Like, I have an executive coach that I work with. My executive coach has an executive coach that they work with. And I'm bringing this up because even us, right? We can give great advice to other individuals, but thinking of that great advice for ourselves, we can become blind to our own inadequacies. Like, we can put our own blinders on, and it's really hard to sit back and see
see everything clearly. And so I love this example of role playing, getting feedback, having someone challenge an idea or a thought or something like that. So that is a great example. I mean, I used this in my previous role. I was struggling with my boss and I needed to have a tough conversation with him. And so I went to the chair of the board and said, hey, I need to have this conversation with my boss. Can I role play with you? And he and I had a conversation, and then I had the conversation with my boss. And it was 10 times better than if I had had it directly with my boss first. And I want to encourage the listeners that is, one of the things when we share these things on the podcast, and we share these stories on the podcast, part of the benefit of this is that maybe you'll hear these and be able to use these examples in your own life. Or you'll, hire a coach and then use these examples to learn and grow from, because that's how the best of us do this. And no one was born as the expert.
That's right. That's right. Not in everything. Yeah. You're 100% right. Like I've had multiple coaches at one time, depending on what was happening, right? Because coaches they'll have expertise in different kinds of things. And so, anytime you can give yourself that different perspective that we were talking about earlier, like you're giving yourself a gift. It's a gift and it's to you and you're worth that. And I know used to coaching had this stigma that, oh, you only hire a coach when you're in trouble. And that's not the reality. It's about just exactly what you just said. It's helping you be at your optimal. You're optimal. And however you define that is your definition. But it's helping you bring the best of you to this world, to your family, to your whoever, the people you lead, so that is an investment and well worth it. Well worth it.
Love it. Okay. So the last topic I want to make sure we cover before we end today is brand story. So this is something you and I are both passionate about. It's work that we both do in our own coaching and collaboration work that we do. And so selfishly, I want to make sure we cover it, because I want to see if there are any tips and tools I can steal from Vicki on how she does it. So if you share anything and then you see me do it, you're going to be like, oh,
I'll be like, yeah, go in.
Exactly. Because the best steal from the best.
That's right. We borrow.
Yeah,
we don't steal. We compliment.
We collaborate. we collaborate. Well, I feel like if you say it out loud to the person and it's being recorded and it goes out to the ether, it's really not stealing.
It's not stealing.
Okay, so let's talk about brand story. So I was talking about this a lot the other day, and I'm actually I'm super excited about something. I am working with my cousin who is amazing. I love him, and I'm working to build up his brand for him. And when you're working with someone who's amazing and yet they have nothing out there about their brand, and you're really starting from scratch kind of, but they have you can see this diamond in the rough, and you are just like, I cannot wait to dig in. So you can tell how excited I am about showcasing Dan Gill. It's going to be coming out, so I'll give that a little teaser. So before we dig into Dan Gill, tell us about how you collaborate and work and how you see developing brand stories for individuals and companies.
Yeah, well, for me, I take the approach from starting with your values. To me, that's the most important, right? Is getting really clear, because you can have a product, you can have a service, but how do you really differentiate yourself from everybody else? And so it's really doing that, sort of what we were talking about with confidence, of taking that inner view, right? So what are your values? Narrow that down to the top 3 that guide every decision you make, right? And then really looking at your strengths. What are your strengths? Because it's easy, especially in the world we live in today, to compare. It's easy to get caught up in, oh, this person does this really great, or that person does this. I want to do that. I want to do this. It's like when you walk into a supermarket and all of a sudden they've become, your grocery store, your clothing store, right? And you're going, okay, but what is really their expertise? So getting really clear on what those strengths are and having that personality come to life. So I just did a brand workshop a couple of weeks ago, and we just did a 1 hour virtually, and I had like 50 people in the room, and it was getting clear on your values. And we think, oh, well, that's no big deal. But it took,
it is huge.
it's huge. And it took we really spent like a long time working on defining it, but then also working in pairs so that you're sharing it with somebody else to flush that out. How does that feel when it comes off my tongue, right? Like, how does it make my body feel? Because it very much is a sensory experience when you're talking about your brand. And then once you've defined those aspects of it, you get into the glitter, right? And what I mean by the glitter, like if you look at Will Empowered, my colors are magentas, they gradiate into a little bit of purple, but I was very, very conscious when I chose that because magenta is very much about feminine power. And so I wanted to reflect that. And I often dress in magenta. All of my collateral has that magenta coloring to it. So I was very, very conscious of what I chose and why I chose that for me. Now, people will say, but sometimes you work with men. And I'm like, yes, I do. And they don't mind. They're like, okay, like she's a badass. She knows who she is. She knows what she wants. And then you pull your story together, right? And that story, like I actually have a workshop coming up in 2 weeks. So I'll do a little call to action here. I have one coming up that's a half-day workshop. And we're getting into the glitter of it. And part of the storytelling is what we were talking about earlier with putting pen to paper and not judging yourself, not critiquing yourself, literally pen to paper and write. Who is Angela? Who is Vicki? What do you want the world to know about you? And so making it super authentic, and that's how you start to craft that story of what you want to tell the world. And another element that I would add to that, and I always think about this, is when I'm not here.
Yes, I was just about to say this.
What will people say? What will they think? What's the impact, the legacy that I've left behind? And years ago, do you know who Robin Sharma is?
No.
Okay, Robin Sharma is he's a world-class coach, guru. He wrote The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. So he was a big-time lawyer and decided to give it up. And he writes he has the 5 a.m. club. He's a firm believer. You get up at 5 a.m., you do your thing. Anyway, he's phenomenal. So look him up, Robin Sharma.
Okay.
But years ago when I got sick, he happened to be in the Toronto area, and I went to a retreat that he did. And it was probably one of the best experiences ever. It was called Your Best Self Awakening Weekend.
Wow.
And one of the exercises we did was we went out in this, it was like acreage of land, and we all had to write. Well, I hate writing, or I used to. I like it now, but I hated it back then. And so I had to write all these things about my legacy, right? So it was basically, I was creating my own eulogy of what I wanted to be said when I pass. And that was, I bawled. I sat and I cried, and I was like, oh my gosh. So then how do I structure my life to live to that, right?
Yes.
So what am I giving back? How am I serving others? And that was very important to me. And we had to get up in front of the room, and it was I don't know, there was 150 people there. We had to get up and read our eulogy, and then we burned it after we read it. And it was literally a life-changing moment, because
I wouldn't want to burn it.
I know,
right?
right?
I forgot all the stuff I'm going to accomplish.
It's all there. It's all in here, in your heart, which is most important.
Right.
But then when you're doing things, it's like the value component. Am I really living my values? Because that at the core is who I am. And so when I'm gone, will people know that about me?
Yeah.
And not that I care what other people think, but it's more of the impact of me being authentic and me being who I'm saying to the world that I am. And so your brand, and I'm going to say this, it doesn't matter if you're in a corporate environment, it doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, a mom at home, we all have a brand because you're engaging with other people, right? So how do you want to show up and how do you want other people to know you, right? So I'm on a roll here, Ange, so bear with me. So you mentioned you mentioned this guy who called you up and he wants to know, how did you get all this, right? He's a vampire, he's a sucker, right? He had a great opportunity there to learn from somebody who has been an incredible giver to the world, somebody who does it naturally because at her core, her values are very much about gratitude and giving, right? And so he had an opportunity there to learn, who am I really? And what impression did he leave with you? Not a good one, right?
Nope.
And so it's like, ask yourself, how do I want? And not from I'm going to pretend to be this, but really when I'm at home, I'm that. No, it's who are you authentically? And how is that demonstrated in your life with the people you come in contact with? Whether you're in the grocery store, you're in a school meeting, or you're at your job, or you're volunteering, whatever. How do you want people to know you? So that brand story becomes important. And often people will say to me, oh, Vicki, and I just had this conversation 2 days ago. They'll say, oh, I don't like being on social media. And it's like, well, you don't have to be on social media. That's not what your brand story is about. If you are trying to make a movement of some type, you're an entrepreneur, you have something to sell, whether it's a service, product, whatever, sure, you're going to be on social media. But your brand is your identity. It's who you are. And that doesn't matter whether you're working, whether you're a mom, whether you're a wife. It's who are you and how do you want that to be viewed in the world?
Yeah, and it's who you said it a moment ago, but I want to reiterate it. It is who are you at your authentic core.
Yeah.
And that is what is so important. And I said that to this individual repeatedly. I was just like, well, it's because that's who I am in all areas of my life. And if someone runs into me at church or at, anywhere that they run into me, I'm the same person in all places. So it's very easy for that to be the case. And I think that is key. The story about the eulogy reminds me of the poem, The Dash. Have you heard of the poem, The Dash by Linda Ellis? Mm-mm. So it is the story, and I have this tagged on my website as well, but it's the story that someone got up to tell a eulogy, and he spoke about, on a tombstone, there are 2 dates. The first date is a date of great joy. It's the date of birth. And the other date is a date of great sadness, of passing. But what really matters is the dash between. Oh. And that is the time spent on earth.
Love that.
And so it is why I have hanging in my entryway of my house, Live the Dash.
Oh, I love that.
Yes, exactly. And, unfortunately, my father was very abusive, and he passed away right before my birthday this year. And in his obituary, I wonder what they're going to put in his obituary, because he did nothing with his life. And all they talked about was that he loved cars. Mm. And it is that reminder is that, when, as you said, it's not that you want to say, all these fake things in it, but it's really like you have this one opportunity in your life, this one opportunity to make a difference, to build a legacy. Make it count. That's it. Yeah. Make it count. Okay, so this we could absolutely talk for a gazillion years. And you know what I was thinking? I was like, this episode is so completely different.
I know, we totally different.
And it's amazing. Okay, Vicki. So, 2 things. One, is there anything you really hoped we would cover that we haven't? And make sure you also tell the listeners how they can find you and get a hold of you as well.
So the number one thing is believe in yourself. Okay. No matter what anybody else says, no matter what anybody else does, believe in you. Really work on that confidence. I know we talked about it a bit and we talked about a lot of different things, but all of it comes together. The trust in yourself, that confidence just continues to build the more you trust yourself. And, when we look at ourselves internally, only you get to be the judge and jury of your life. So make it count. I love what you said about the dash. I think that's just phenomenal. So if you are curious about more of the work that I do, you can reach out to me or follow me on at Will Empowered on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. I engage mostly on Instagram and LinkedIn. You can find me also as Vicki Bradley. So that's where you can find me, but happy to have conversations if I can answer questions. And we do have a branding workshop coming up. So we do that periodically, have leadership development and branding workshops that are ongoing. So just check in with us at Will Empowered and you'll get to see all the great things that we're doing.
Awesome. And we will include all of the links in the show notes.
Awesome.
So that you can check that. Make sure that you follow and subscribe. I know that Vicki has an amazing newsletter, so you'll want to make sure you subscribe and get all of her wisdom that way as well. Okay, and the final requirement, Vicki, is your favorite motivational quote.
Yes.
So what is that?
My favorite is believe it and you will achieve it. I have lived by that pretty much my entire life. And still to this day, and it sits on my desk, I have a little thing that says believe and you will achieve. I firmly believe that, and that is mainly my own philosophy of knowing it at my core, knowing that whatever I decide, I will achieve it. I might have different paths that I have to take to get there, but ultimately things will happen the way it's meant to happen. So thank you so much for having me here today. It's been such a pleasure to see you again. And don't forget,
are amazing.
You will be on my podcast coming up soon. So Women in Leadership Talk. Angela will be on our show. And so you have to chime in for that one too.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you for bringing the badass to this podcast. I am very grateful.
My pleasure, always.
Thanks for joining me for today's episode of the Badass Leaders Podcast. To hear more interviews with industry experts and learn how to grow your career and leadership potential, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to ensure you do not miss future episodes. This podcast is a production of the AGN Group. To learn more about the AGN Group, visit our website at theagnGroup.com. There, you can discover more about our services, which include hosting workshops, management consulting, brand strategy, keynote speaking, and more. Follow us on all social media channels shown on the screen and displayed in the show notes. And until next week, be brave and be badass.